The stars were dying one by one. Ambassador Hayes stood in the command center of Velen Prime, watching red dots disappear from the holographic map. Each vanishing light represented another world consumed by the Morgok Empire's unstoppable war machine. Colony 77 just went silent, her communications officer reported, his voice barely above a whisper. That's 12 worlds this week. Hay closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. The Velen Confederacy had enjoyed 3 centuries of peace. Their defense fleets were meant for patrol duties and rescue operations, not fighting the galaxy's most ruthless military force. The Morgok ships moved like hungry shadows across space, consuming everything in their path. Ma'am, her young aide Jun approached nervously, clutching an old data tablet. I've been searching through the ancient archives like you asked. I found something, but... He hesitated, glancing around the command center. Speak freely, Hay said. There's an old emergency protocol, from the early days of the Galactic Council. Before my time, before yours. It's called the Deathworlder Summoning Code. Hay felt her blood turn cold. Every child in the galaxy knew those stories. The quarantined system, the forbidden world called Earth. The violent species that had been locked away because they were too dangerous to live among civilized peoples. You mean the humans? She said quietly. John nodded. The protocol hasn't been used in 3,000 years. Not since they were quarantined. But technically, it's still active. Hay looked at the tactical display again. Another red dot flickered and died. The Morgok Empire would reach Velen Prime within days. Their own defense fleets had been shattered in the first wave of attacks. No other species would help them. Everyone was too afraid of becoming the Morgok's next target. Show me the code, she said. Jun handed her the tablet with shaking hands. The transmission sequence was simple enough, but the destination coordinates pointed toward the most feared region of space, the Sol System, the place where monsters lived. Ambassador, her defense coordinator spoke up. Surely you're not considering this. The humans were quarantined for good reason. They're violent, unpredictable. They come from a world so hostile, it should have killed them centuries ago. Hay stared at the emergency beacon controls. Outside the command center's windows, she could see civilian transports fleeing the planet. Families running from their homes, carrying whatever they could save. Better to deal with unpredictable allies than certain extinction, she said, entering the ancient codes. The transmission array hummed to life, sending humanity's first contact with the galaxy in 300 years. A simple message broadcast toward the quarantine system. Help us. We're dying. Hay pressed the activation button and waited. Either she had just saved her people, or doomed the entire galaxy. Admiral Jin Ho was enjoying his morning coffee when the universe changed forever. He stood on the observation deck of the battleship Earth's Pride, watching Mars grow larger. In the viewport, as the human fleet conducted routine training exercises. 300 years of isolation had made these drills feel pointless. Who were they training to fight? Then the communication alert rang out across the bridge. Admiral to the command center immediately. Came the urgent voice over the intercom. Jin set down his coffee and walked quickly to the bridge, where his communications officer Yoon was staring at her screen with wide eyes. Sir, we're receiving a transmission, she said, her voice shaking slightly. It's not from any human colony or station. Pirates? Jin asked, though he knew that was unlikely. Human space was too well defended. No, sir. It's from outside the quarantine zone. The encryption is ancient. I had to dig through files from before the isolation. The message is simple, but clear. Help us. We're dying. Jin felt his heart skip a beat. No alien species had contacted humanity in 3 centuries. Not since the Galactic Council had declared them too dangerous to interact with civilized society. They built an invisible wall around human space and pretended Earth didn't exist. Origin point? He asked. The Velen Confederacy, Yoon replied, pulling up star charts. Peaceful trading species. Agricultural worlds, mostly. And, sir, ... double quotes, she paused, looking uncomfortable. What is it? They were one of the species that voted for our quarantine. Jin laughed, but there was no humor in it. The irony was perfect. The same aliens who had called humans violent monsters were now begging those same monsters for help. What's their situation? He asked. Another officer, Park, spoke up from the tactical station. Based on the transmission timestamp and emergency protocols, they're facing immediate extinctional level threat. This isn't a diplomatic request, it's a desperate plea. Jin walked to the center of the bridge and looked out at the training fleet. Massive dreadnoughts powered by contained fusion reactions. Fighter wings piloted by soldiers who had trained their entire lives for a war that never came. Marines, whose ancestors had conquered Earth's most hostile environments. For 300 years, humanity had been preparing for a fight that everyone said would never happen. All ships, this is Admiral Jin Ho, he announced over the fleet communication system. Cancelled training exercises. Prepare for emergency deployment. We have aliens to save. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. Finally, after centuries of waiting, humanity was going back to war. The alarm klaxons echoed through every human station and ship within 1,000,000 kilometers of Earth. Admiral Jin's emergency order had activated protocols that hadn't been used since the quarantine began 3 centuries ago. Across the solar system, humanity's sleeping war machine woke up hungry. Captain Nari stood on the bridge of her destroyer Silent Thunder, watching the most incredible sight she'd ever seen. Hidden doors opened in asteroids that had looked empty for generations. Massive shapes emerged from the darkness, dreadnoughts the size of small cities, their hulls black as space itself. These weren't the patrol ships that aliens might expect. These were weapons built by a species that had clawed its way to the top of the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. Holy hell, whispered her weapons officer Dong. I didn't know we had ships that big. Earth's been busy during the quarantine, Nari replied, watching a behemoth drift past her destroyer like a steel mountain. Its weapons pods could probably crack a moon in half. At Luna Base, fighter pilots scrambled to their craft with grins on their faces. They'd trained for this moment their entire lives. Flying simulations against alien ship designs that their grandparents had fought. Squadron leader Kim checked his weapon systems one last time before launching into the growing armada. This is what we've been waiting for, boys and girls, he announced to his wing. Time to remind the galaxy why they locked us away. On Mars, marine transports loaded their most precious cargo, human soldiers. These weren't the peaceful explorers that other species imagined humans to be. These were descendants of warriors who had survived Earth's ice ages, volcanic winters, and continental wars. They wore power armor designed to function in crushing gravity and toxic atmospheres. Their weapons could punch through materials that would stop any other species' bullets. Sergeant Ha watched her Marines board the transport, each one eager for action. Remember, she told them, we're not just fighting for these Velen people. We're showing the entire galaxy what happens when you corner humanity. Within 6 hours, 200 warships had assembled in formation around Earth, ships that had been built in secret, powered by technology that pushed the boundaries of physics. Black hole containment cores hummed with barely controlled energy. Weapon systems that could sterilize entire worlds charged up to full power. Fleet status report, Admiral Jin requested from his flagship. All ships ready for jump, Admiral, Captain Na, responded. Destination coordinates locked in. Jin smiled. After 3 centuries of isolation, humanity was about to make a very loud entrance back onto the galactic stage. Execute jump, he ordered. Let's show them what Deathworlders can do. Ambassador Hay was watching her world die when the impossible happened. Through the command center's reinforced windows, She could see Morgok bombardment ships raining fire on Velen Prime's capital city. Ancient buildings that had stood for thousands of years crumbled into dust. The planetary shields had failed 2 hours ago, and now it was just a matter of time before the surface became uninhabitable. "Ma'am, something's happening," her sensor operator called out, his voice filled with confusion. "I'm detecting massive energy signatures. Ships are jumping. In system." Hayes' heart sank. More Morgok reinforcements. The end would come even faster now. But then she saw them. Ships unlike anything in her experience materialized around Velen Prime, not the blocky utilitarian vessels of the Morgok Empire, but sleek predators that seemed to cut through space itself. They were massive, some larger than Morgok dreadnoughts, but they moved with deadly grace that made them look alive. "Those aren't Morgok ships," whispered her defense coordinator. The lead vessel was a monster of black metal and glowing energy conduits. It dwarfed the command station, yet somehow gave the impression that it could dance through space like a fighter craft. Weapon ports lined its hull like the teeth of some ancient sea predator. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced, his hands shaking as he worked the controls. "Velen Confederacy, this is Admiral Jin Ho of the Human Defense Force," came a voice that sounded impossibly calm given the chaos around them. "We received your message. Point us toward the enemy." Hay stared at the communication panel. Humans, the quarantined Deathworlders, had actually come. After 300 years of silence, they had answered her desperate call. "Admiral," she managed to say, her voice cracking, "thank you for responding, but I must warn you. The Morgok have over 2,000 ships in this system. They outnumber you 10 to 1. Perhaps you should retreat," and Jin's laughter cut through her words. It wasn't a cruel laugh, but it was cold and confident in a way that made her spine tingle. "Ma'am, we're from Earth," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "We like those odds." Around Velen Prime, the human fleet began moving into combat formation. Their ships didn't scatter or hesitate like the Velen defense forces had. Instead, they moved toward the Morgok fleet like wolves approaching wounded prey. Hay realized she was about to witness something that no living being had seen in 3 centuries. Humans at war. The first shots of the battle told the entire story. Admiral Jin's fleet opened fire at maximum range, and the Morgok commanders immediately knew they had made a terrible mistake. Human plasma cannons, designed to punch through Earth's chaotic magnetic storms, sliced through Morgok energy shields, like they weren't even there. The aliens had spent centuries perfecting defensive systems that could stop any known weapon in the galaxy. They had never faced weapons built by a species that considered lightning storms a minor inconvenience. "Impossible," gasped Morgok, Fleet Commander Vex, as his forward ships simply vanished under human fire. "Nothing can penetrate our shields that easily." The human fleet moved like nothing he had ever seen. Instead of the careful, predictable formations that civilized species used, they fought like a pack of wild animals. Ships would suddenly break formation, dive through impossible angles, and emerge behind Morgok vessels that thought they were safely positioned. Commander Tay led his fighter squadron into the heart of the enemy formation, his pilots whooping. With joys they pulled maneuvers that should have killed them. The G-forces that would crush alien pilots were just another Tuesday for humans who had grown up on a high-gravity death world. Target-rich environment, laughed Pilot Cho as he rolled his fighter between 2 Morgok cruisers, firing at both simultaneously. "It's like they're not even trying to avoid us." The Morgok tactical computers, programmed for thousands of years of predictable galactic warfare, couldn't process what they were seeing. Human ships would suddenly accelerate at crushing speeds, make impossible turns, or dive straight into what should have been suicide attacks. Their pilots fought like they had nothing to lose and everything to prove, in desperation. The Morgok flagship Eternal Darkness attempted to retreat. The massive command ship, larger than anything in the human fleet, turned and began charging. Its jump drive. Captain Mee's destroyer Storm Chaser was there waiting. Going somewhere? She asked over an open channel, her voice cheerfully conversational. The Morgok commander screamed, something in his native language that the translation computers couldn't process. I'll take that as a no, Mee said, and launched every missile her ship carried. The eternal darkness exploded in a brilliant fireball that lit up Velen Prime's night sky. Around it, the remaining Morgok ships were either destroyed or fleeing in panic. 18 minutes after the first shot was fired, the battle was over. The mighty Morgok Empire had just learned why humanity had been quarantined for 300 years. The news traveled faster than light itself. Within hours of the Battle of Velen Prime, every species in the galaxy knew the same terrifying truth. The humans were back, in the luxurious council chambers of the Galactic Senate. Representatives, who had once voted to quarantine humanity, now watched in stunned silence as reports flooded in. The Morgok Empire, which had seemed unstoppable just days ago, was being systematically destroyed by a species most aliens had tried to forget existed. They can't be that effective, insisted Senator Krill of the Zephyrian Trade Union. Our intelligence says they only sent 200 ships against a force of thousands. The holographic display showed the brutal reality. Human fleets were cutting through Morgok territory like a hot knife through butter. Their ships moved with impossible speed and aggression, striking at 3 different star systems simultaneously. What should have been a months-long campaign was happening in days. On the Morgok homeworld, Emperor Vex paced frantically in his war room, screaming at his remaining generals. His once mighty empire was crumbling around him, and he couldn't understand how or why. What are these creatures? He roared, slamming his fist on the tactical display. They fight like rabid animals. No strategy, no honor, just pure violence. His military advisors cowered before him. Half of their fleet had been destroyed in less than a week. The humans attacked without warning, used weapons that shouldn't exist, and fought with a ferocity that defied all military logic. Thousands of light away, Admiral Wu sat in his command chair aboard the battleship Iron Will, reading the intercepted Morgok communications with a broad smile. His Marines had just finished boarding another Morgok station, and the results were predictably one-sided, sir. The Morgok are calling us rabid animals again, reported his communications officer Lee, trying not to laugh. Wu chuckled as he watched his Marines in their powered armor march through the station's corridors. Morgok weapons that could punch through any other species. Defenses bounced harmlessly off human battlesuits. The aliens inside were surrendering faster than his soldiers could process them. Rabid animals, he mused aloud. I prefer highly motivated. The truth was simple, but terrifying for the galaxy to accept. Humans didn't fight like civilized species, because they weren't civilized. They were survivors from a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. Every human was a descendant of creatures that had fought their way to the top of the most dangerous food chain in known space. The galaxy was about to learn what that really meant. The liberation of Kepler-44 took exactly 4 hours and 37 minutes. Sergeant Da pressed her boot against the reinforced blast door and felt it buckle under the crushing gravity that the Morgok had thought would protect them forever. This place is supposed to be uninhabitable, laughed Corporal Yoon as he hefted his plasma rifle through air so thick it would suffocate most species. 3 times Earth gravity, toxic atmosphere, constant seismic activity. No wonder they thought it was the perfect place for a fortress. Da smiled inside her helmet. The Morgok Empire had built their most secure installations on worlds that would kill any civilized species within minutes. High-gravity death worlds where the very air was poison and the ground shook constantly. They called these places their impregnable strongholds. Humans called them slightly challenging. Contact ahead, reported Private SEO from point position. Morgok defensive line. Looks like they're dug in pretty deep. Through the mountain fortress, DA could see the liberation happening in real time. Human marines were moving through corridors that had been designed to crush invaders under impossible weight. The Morgok defenders, already struggling just to stand upright, were no match for soldiers who had trained their entire lives in Earth's punishing environment. "Ma'am, we're getting reports from the other teams," Yun said, checking his communication display. "2nd Battalion just cleared the labor camps. They found over 10,000 prisoners, different species. All of them worked nearly to death." DA's jaw tightened. She'd seen the intelligence reports. The Morgok Empire didn't just conquer worlds, they enslaved entire populations, forcing them to work in conditions that killed them slowly. They used high-gravity worlds as natural prisons, because no rescue was possible. No rescue had been possible until today. "Sir, incoming transmission," crackled her radio. "The Morgok are requesting terms. They want to negotiate a ceasefire." DA kicked down another blast door, the reinforced metal crumpling like paper under her powered boot. Beyond it, she could see Morgok soldiers cowering in their defensive positions, their weapons shaking in hands that could barely support their own weight in this gravity. "Tell them we don't negotiate with slavers," she said, raising her weapon. Behind her, she could hear the cheers of liberated prisoners echoing through the fortress corridors. Dozens of species that had suffered under Morgok rule for generations were finally free, and all it had taken was humanity doing what humans did best, thriving in places where nothing else could survive. The Morgok homeworld had never been conquered in 3,000 years of galactic history. Its planetary shields were the most advanced in the galaxy, powered by the cores of dead stars. Its surface defenses could destroy entire fleets before they reached the atmosphere. Every military expert agreed that conquering Krax Prime would take years of siege warfare. Human assault ships punched through the impenetrable shields in 6 hours. Colonel Yu watched from his dropship as the first wave of human transports descended through atmosphere so thick it would crush alien vessels like tin cans. The pressure differentials that made Krax Prime uninhabitable to most species barely registered to humans whose ancestors had survived in Earth's deepest ocean trenches. "Sir, planetary defense grid is going dark," reported his pilot Chen. "Looks like Captain Rose Bomber Wing took out their main generators." Through the viewport, you could see the Morgok capital city burning, not from human weapons, but from the panic of a population that had never imagined their world could fall. 3 millennia of arrogant expansion had ended in 36 hours. The Imperial Palace rose above the city like a mountain of black crystal, designed to intimidate visitors and demonstrate Morgok power. Today it would witness the end of an empire. Used Marines moved through the palace corridors with methodical efficiency. Morgok guards, elite soldiers who had terrorized a dozen species, surrendered without firing a shot. They had seen what human weapons did to their fleets and had no desire to test them personally. The throne room was exactly what you had expected. Massive, ostentatious, designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. Emperor Vex sat on his crystal throne, surrounded by the surviving members of his noble court. They all looked like frightened children. "Your Majesty," Yu said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "I am Colonel Yu of the Human Marine Corps. You will surrender unconditionally." Vex's voice shook as he spoke. We accept your terms." "You don't understand," Yu replied, stepping closer. "Your empire is dissolved. Your slave species are free. Your war fleets will be scrapped. Your nobility will face trial for crimes against sentient life." The Emperor stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. "What are you people? What kind of monsters could do this to us?" Yu's helmet retracted with a soft hiss, revealing a scarred face and the coldest smile Vex had ever seen. "We're humans," he said simply. "We're from Earth, and we don't like bullies." The Grand Assembly Hall on Centauri Station had never seen anything like it. For the first time in 3 centuries, A human stood at the central podium, addressing the Galactic Council. Admiral Jin looked out at thousands of alien faces, many belonging to species that had voted to quarantine his people long before he was born. Ambassador Hay stepped forward first, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. The Velen Confederacy formally requests that humanity be restored to full galactic citizenship, she announced. Not as the dangerous outcasts they were branded, but as the protectors they have proven themselves to be. A murmur rippled through the assembly. The representatives had all seen the reports. The mighty Morgok Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for generations, had been completely destroyed in less than 2 weeks. Their slave camps were liberated, their fleets scrap metal, their territory now protected by human patrol ships. Senator Krill of the Zephyrian Trade Union stood up, his scaled hands shaking slightly. The quarantine protocols have served the galaxy well for 300 years. Perhaps they should remain in place. Admiral Jin smiled at that. He'd expected resistance from some quarters. Senator, he said calmly, the quarantine is already over. My fleets are positioned throughout former Morgok space. Human colonies are being established on liberated worlds. The question isn't whether you'll accept us back, it's whether you want us as friends or as strangers. The hall fell silent. Everyone understood the implications. Humanity had just demonstrated military power beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. They could choose to be civilized neighbors or dangerous unknowns. We hold no grudges, Jin continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the assembly. The past is the past. But understand this clearly, we will protect any species that asks for help. The age of empires conquering the weak is over. As he spoke, reports were already flowing in from across the galaxy. The hegemony of Tar had quietly cancelled their invasion plans for the peaceful worlds. The merchant princes had suddenly become very interested in fair trade agreements. 3 different warlord factions had announced they were retiring to pursue agriculture. The vote was unanimous. Humanity was officially welcomed back into galactic society, not as pariahs to be feared, but as guardians to be respected. The Deathworlders had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. The end.